Oh, there's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another In Other Words, which is an occasional series where I talk about vocabulary, idioms, grammatical patterns that I encounter in my reading. I want to make sure you all understand that I am not a professional etymologist, but I do enjoy doing linguistic and etymological deep dives with the reference materials available to me free online. I make mistakes or I don't get to the bottom of some of these lexical, etymological mysteries, and the comment section is where a lot of the real gold is. But I do my best, and I have a good time doing it. So here are 6 pieces of vocabulary from my 2020 In Other Words list. So let's get started. First, a couple words from this collection of Edna O'Brien's short stories, A Fanatic Heart. Not only from the same short story, but the same page. The story is called Tough Men, and the first expression is his nibs. So, at the very top of the page, his nibs is off again today, he said. So that immediately twigged with me because my dad would sometimes say that. Maybe he still does, but I remember from my childhood, Dad would be talking in a kind of joking, mildly satirical way about someone and refer to him as his nibs. So the meaning of his nibs, which I could get from the context of the way my dad would use it, is it's a mock title used for someone in authority, or the nuance is often someone who thinks they're in authority but actually isn't. So it's a mildly disrespectful, teasing, bantering way to talk about somebody who might be a bit full of themselves or maybe is the boss, but it's a kind of playful, kind of disrespectful way to refer. You wouldn't say it directly to the person unless you were intending to tease them or possibly offend them. So I wanted to look this one up. So yeah, mildly derisive mock title. First found in print in 1820 according to the Oxford English Dictionary. And apparently the Oxford English Dictionary folk opine that it's a variant. Nibs is a variant on nabs, because they did find examples of his nabs earlier than 1820. And nab is an old English word. I don't know if it's capital O, capital E, old English word, but it's an old English word that means head. And nib in the 17th century was a slang term for a freshman at Cambridge. And there's also neb, which is an old English word for beak, nose, or mouth. Nib, the end of a pen, comes from the same word family. Some speculation that the neb, the nose, that the snobbishness, the social superiority, the nose in the air, but that is speculation. Also that knob, N-O-B, might be linked to nobleman. They can't agree. The second word, and I don't need to read the sentences. I don't usually read the sentences unless there's some special reason. But the second word on page 35 of the Edna O'Brien collection was fluke. And I know what a fluke is. You know what a fluke is. It's just a lucky chance. So why does it mean that? The original fluke was a flatfish coming from the Old Norse language, going back to the Proto-Indo-European root plat. But nobody has been able to make a connection to fluke as in lucky chance, good luck. But the fishy meaning of fluke did give rise to another one, which is the flat end of the arm of an anchor. I will put a picture up here if I can find one, because it's flat. So they think there's definitely a connection between the flukes on the arm of an anchor and the fluke, which is the flatfish. But nobody has been able to definitively, authoritatively make a connection to this lucky stroke or chance hit. That meaning came out of billiards, and it meant a lucky shot, and that dated from the mid-19th century. Some speculation that it's related to a dialectical word from the Whitby dialect in the UK, fluke, but in fact that dialectical word fluke in the Whitby tongue hasn't been found any earlier than 1876, so it's probably not the origin of the meaning of the billiards, because the billiards one, appeared quite a few decades earlier, so nobody really knows. At the end of last year, I read Fifth Business, which is the first novel of the Deptford trilogy. Didn't actually care for it that much, although I loved the way it started. Early in the novel, one of the characters gets the Riot Act read to him, and I also remember that phrase from my childhood because I was such a bad little tyke. I wonder how many of you know that expression, but I certainly grew up with it. So, if you get the Riot Act read to you, if somebody reads the Riot Act to you, it just means they chastise you sternly, loudly. You get a severe warning. And this was fascinating because it actually was a thing. The Riot Act came into force in Britain in 1714, and it was to break up riots, punish people who were civilly disobedient, and much like in America, where your Miranda rights, have I got that right? Is it Miranda? Yeah, your Miranda rights are read to you with every crime show you watch, every movie. You have the right to remain silent, and that has to be read aloud. The Riot Act, for police or whoever to enforce the Riot Act, they had to actually read it aloud to the protesters. And it went thusly. Our sovereign Lord the King chargeth and commandeth all persons being assembled immediately to disperse themselves, and peaceably to depart to their habitations, or to their lawful business, upon the pains contained in the Act made in the first year of King George, for preventing tumults and riotous assemblies. God save the King. Once that was read, they had a 1-hour deadline to disperse. Anybody found at the scene of the riot after 60 minutes had committed a felony punishable by death. So that's where we get the expression, to have the Riot Act read to you. I didn't have the best experience trying to read George Eliot's novel Felix Holt, the Radical, for Victober last year. I got this far, which wasn't maybe a third of the way through it, and I gave up, but I have been told that I'm missing something great, so I am going to give it another try at some point in the future. Certainly lots of great vocabulary in here, and the one that I want to talk about from early in the novel is being hoisted with your own petard. Let's find that sentence. It's been a long time since I read that in here. So yeah, the sentence is very simple. It's in the context of some political discussion involving William Pitt, and whoever the speaker is says they shall be hoist with their own petard. So, I mean, I've heard the expression, and I probably have looked it up over the years, but it's one of those idioms that just has not stuck. So every time I hear it, I think, I should probably know what that means. So it comes from Shakespeare. It entered the English language as an idiom from Shakespeare, and it means to have some kind of aggressive, offensive thing backfire and hurt yourself. Let's look up the Shakespeare quote. It's from Hamlet. A petard was a very primitive type of bomb. Hoist doesn't mean explode, but it does mean lifted. And so the image is, if you're hoisted with your own bomb, it means the bomb maker, the bomb planter who's planning to plant a bomb, like apparently Claudius had planned to, that it would explode and it would lift the bomb thrower, the bomb maker, up. There we go. It's Hamlet's line when he discovers Claudius's plot to kill him, and that's where it comes from, and it goes like this. Let it work, for 'tis the sport to have the engineer hoist with his own petard, and shall go hard, but I will delve 1 yard below their minds and blow them up at the moon. So it comes from Hamlet. Let's look at hoist and petard separately. So hoist entered English in the 1540s, meaning to raise, lift, or elevate. This entered English through Middle Dutch, Low German, Old Norse, Danish, Swedish, most European languages, but they haven't been able to trace the etymological family tree any farther back than that. Interesting, I think it's interesting that the word heist is a variation which didn't enter English until the 1940s, maybe from 1927. An American English slang for, as we all know, some kind of a theft, shoplifting, And also, farther back than that, heist in British slang meant to lift someone on your shoulders so they can break in somewhere and steal something, which is probably where the American meaning comes from. The lifting meaning of hoist you can see very clearly in heist, and I didn't know that. That's fascinating. So now let's look at petard. A petard, I'll put up some images here. It's a small bomb used for blowing up gates and walls when breaching fortifications. French originally, dating back to the 16th century, and it comes from and the people that did it, they were old farts, because it comes from the French verb peter, I don't know how to pronounce it, sorry, peter, which means to break wind, from the old French pet, which meant a fart, from the Latin peditum, which was the past participle of pedere, which meant to break wind, going back to the Proto-Indo-European root, I don't know how to pronounce it, pezd, which meant to fart. Yeah, this is my favorite part of this episode of In Other Words. So, explosion. You have to believe me, I'm not trying to gaslight you. I was hoping to find a bonanza of other English words that come from the same Proto-Indo-European root, but the only ones I found, one that is ridiculous, pediculosis, which means lice infestation, dates from 1809, which goes back to pedis, meaning louse, but connected to pedere, to break wind. Foul-smelling insect, that's a bit much, but the other one is feisty. Feisty is a cousin of fart and petard. So feisty goes back to the same Proto-Indo-European root. Feisty means aggressive, exuberant, touchy. In its earlier connotations in American English, meant a small dog, and even before that, a fist. And it goes back to feisting curry, stinking cur, from the 1520s, from Middle English, going back to fiston, break wind. Proto-Germanic fistus, meaning a fart, coming from that same Proto-Indo-European root. There's an 1811 slang dictionary that defines fice, F-I-C-E, which is the great-grandmother of the word feisty, as a small windy escape backwards, more obvious to the nose than ears. Frequently by old ladies charged on their lapdogs. I think that means that the old ladies would fart, but they would blame it on their dogs, if I'm reading that correctly. Yeah, feisty in modern usage means lively, determined, courageous, but it has this very farty etymology. But I digress. And also, scapegrace was used, and I had only heard that a few times, so I looked that up. That means a mischievous or a wayward person, especially a young person or child, a rascal, a scamp. Now, it sounds like scapegoat, and the meaning is very different, but there is a cousinship, there is a kinship. They both go back to the verb scape, which was a variant of the verb we all still use today, is escape. And scape used to be a lot more common than it is. So scapegrace first appeared in English in the mid-18th century, some 2 centuries after scapegoat entered English. And the literal meaning was one who has escaped the grace of God. There was a variant of spendthrift that nobody uses anymore called scape thrift and similar. And there was a synonym for scapegrace, want grace, one who wants the grace of God. And apparently, bird watchers call a certain type of loon with a red throat a scapegrace, but that's rare. So let's look at scape. Scape entered English in the late 13th century and was used in written English until the late 17th. Escape comes from the idea of getting out of one's cape. So somebody's chasing you and they grab you, but you manage to extricate yourself from the cape you are wearing, and that's all they get. And you have escaped. Ex-cape. Whew, that's okay. And so, cape, a sleeveless cloak, circular covering for the shoulders, goes back to cap, which in late Old English not only meant something on your head, but also referred to a cape. So they, any kind of garments or whatever on that upper end of the body is kind of all connected. And some speculation that sounds very convincing to me, but there's some speculation that it goes back to the Latin kaput, meaning head, which and the Proto-Indo-European root is kaput, which doesn't the original meaning of kaput mean to be decapitated? Decapitated? Listen, hey, that just came to me. Decapitated, cap, decapitated. That's fascinating because when I look up the etymology of kaput, which is a German word we've used in English since 1895, it doesn't make, and the French phrase that means to make a bonnet, there's no reference to the idea of losing your head as being killed, even though kaput means finished, worn out, or dead. I think that's a slip-up, and I should send them a letter and draw their attention to that. So the Proto-Indo-European root, kaput, which is where we get escape and scapegrace and scapegoat, also shows up in words like cabbage, ahead, cadet, achieve, biceps, capitulation, capital, capsize, corporal mischief, precipitation. Oh my goodness, that's fascinating. The last one is well-nigh, the adverb, which I encountered in two separate places. I encountered it in Lytton Strachey's biography of Queen Victoria and in a short story by Thomas Hardy, The Withered Arm. In this anthology, The Golden Age of British Short Stories, 1890 to 1914, edited by Philip Hensher. Well-nigh means almost, but why? And I've heard it all my life, but never was curious enough to look it up until now. So in the Queen Victoria biography, in a paragraph that introduces Lord Melbourne, Victoria's first Prime Minister, William Lamb, Viscount Melbourne, and all I need to read you is the one sentence, but it's referring to the fact that his older brother died, and then he became the heir to all the riches and opportunities that would have gone to his brother. The wealth, he got a peerage and the possibility of high advancement, and then within that charmed circle, whatever one's personal disabilities, it was difficult to fail. And to him, with all his advantages, success was well-nigh unavoidable, was almost unavoidable. And how does Hardy use it? So this is a very dark, mysterious, kind of eerie relation between two women that has to do with a supernatural dream. Don't need any more context, but here's the sentence. The summer drew on, and Rhoda Brooke almost dreaded to meet Mrs. Lodge again, notwithstanding that her feeling for the young wife amounted well-nigh to affection. It amounted almost to affection. So, why does well-nigh mean almost? Probably we should start with the second part of the phrase. Nigh, an adverb meaning near, nearby, close together, adjacent, comes from the Middle English ne, from which we get neighbour. Okay. Going back to Proto-Germanic, Old Saxon, Old Middle Dutch, and German, Gothic. Okay, so this is fascinating, at least for me. In Old English, nigh had a comparative form, which was near. So near meant nigher, if I can put it that way. It was the comparative version of nigh. So just remember, nigh means close together. Or, to translate it into how we understand it, it means near. But the old near was the comparative of nigh. And then the superlative in the Old English was, I'll spell it because I don't know how to pronounce it, nehst. And that evolved into our word next. The old comparative form of nigh, near, and the old superlative form of nigh, nehsta, which became next. Those split off completely, and so they don't, in modern English, have any... I mean, they're all have a sense of adjacency or closeness, right? And in fact, nigh is the only one that sounds old-fashioned, but it used to be nigh, near, and next. Fascinating. Beyond that, we don't know anything about where it comes from past the Germanic part of the etymological family tree. The old meaning of well was very much or very. So, very nearly. I almost killed him. I very nearly killed him. Well-nigh. That was a bit of a rabbit hole, but I had fun. That's what I got for this time. Thanks for watching.